Okay, welcome back. Welcome back. We're doing our 48 Laws of Power, Chapter 3. And I'm liking this chapter. Conceal your intentions. Keep people off balance and in the dark by never revealing the purpose behind your actions. If they have no clue what you are up to, they cannot prepare a defense. That is a fact. Don't let your left hand know what your right hand doing. And that's a fact. Guide them far enough down the wrong path. Envelope them in enough smoke. And by the time they realize your intentions, it will be too late. That's major. That's major. Use decoy objects of desire and red herrings to throw people off the scent. If at any point in the deception you practice people have the slightest suspicion as to your intentions, do not give them the chance to sense what you are up to. Throw them off the scent by dragging red herrings across the path. Use false sincerity. Send ambiguous signals. Set up misleading objects of desire. Unable to distinguish the genuine from the false, they cannot pick out your real goal. Wow. That is so good right there. Over several weeks, Nina de Lancos, the most infamous courtesan of the 17th century France, listened patiently as Marquis de Savigny explained his struggles in pursuing a beautiful, difficult young countess. Nina was 62 at the time and more than experienced in the matters of love. The Marquis was a lad of 22, handsome, dashing, but hopelessly inexperienced in romance. At first, Nixon was amused to hear the Marquis talk about his mistakes, but finally she had had enough. Unable to bear ineptitude in any realm, least of all in seducing a woman, she decided to take the young lad under her wing. First, he had to understand that it was war, and that the beautiful countess was a citadel to which he had to lay siege as carefully as any general. Every step had to be planned and executed with the utmost attention to detail and nuance. Instructing the Marquis to start over, Nina told him to approach the countess with a bit of distance and air of nonchalance. The next time the two were alone, she said he would confide in the countess as would a friend, but not a potential lover. Be friends first. Well, I agree with that anyway. Be friends first. This was to throw her off the scent. The countess was no longer to take his interest in her for granted. Perhaps he was only interested in friendship. Nina planned ahead. Once the countess was confused, it would be time to make her jealous. At the next encounter at a major fete in Paris, the Marquis would show up with a beautiful young woman at his side. This beautiful young woman had equally beautiful friends, so that wherever the countess would now see the Marquis, he would be surrounded by the most stunning young women in Paris. Not only would the countess be jealous, she would come to see the Marquis as someone who was desired by others. It was hard for Nina to make the Marquis understand, but she patiently explained that a woman who is interested in a man wants to see the other women are interested in him. That is true. Not only does that give him instant value, it makes all the more satisfying to snatch him from their clutches. That's true. Once the Countess was jealous but intrigued, it would be time to gull her. On Nina's instructions, the Marquis would fail to show up at affairs where the Countess expected to see him. Then suddenly he would appear at salons he had never frequented before, but that the Countess attended often. She would be unable to predict his moves. All of this will push her into the state of emotional confusion that is a prerequisite for successful seduction. These moves were executed and took several weeks. Nina monitored the Marquis' progress. Through her network of spies, she heard how the Countess would laugh a little harder at his witty, listen more closely to his stories. She heard that the Countess was suddenly asking questions about him. Her friends told her that at social fairs, the Countess would often look up at the Marquis following his steps. Nina felt certain that the young woman was falling under his spell. It was a matter of weeks now, maybe a month or two, but if all went smoothly, the citadel would fall. A few days later, the Marquis was at the Countess' home. They were alone. Suddenly, he was a different man, the time acting on his own impulse rather than following Nina's instructions. He took the Countess' hand and told her he was in love with her. The young woman seemed confused, a reaction he did not expect. She became polite and excused herself. For the rest of the evening, she avoided his eyes, was not there to say goodnight to him. The next few times he visited, he was told she was not at home. When she finally admitted him again, the two felt awkward and uncomfortable with each other. The spell was broken. Nina de Linchos knew everything about the art of love. The greatest writers, thinkers, and politicians of the time had been lovers, men like La Rochefort, Molière, and Richelieu. Seduction was a game to her, to be practiced with skill. As she got older, her reputation grew. The most important families in France would send their sons to her to be instructed in the matters of love. Nina knew that men and women are very different, but when it came to seduction, they feel the same. Deep down inside, they often sense when they are being seduced, but they give in because they enjoy the feeling of being led alone. It is a pleasure to let go and to allow the other person to deter you into a strange country. Everything in seduction, however, depends on suggestion. You cannot announce your intentions or reveal them directly in words. Instead, you must throw your targets off the scent. To surrender to your guidance, they must be appropriately confused. You have to scramble your signals, appear interested in another man or woman, then hint at being interested in the target, then become indifferent again. Such patterns not only confuse but excite them. Imagine the story from the Countess' perspective. After a few of Marquis' moves, she sensed the Marquis was playing some sort of game, but the game delighted her. She did not know where he was leading her, but so much the better. His moves intrigued her, each of them keeping her waiting for the next. She even enjoyed her jealousy and confusion, for sometimes any emotion is better than the boredom of security. Perhaps the Marquis had ulterior motives, as most men do, but she was willing to wait and see. Probably if she had been made to wait long enough, what he was up to would have not mattered. The moment the Marquis uttered the fatal word love, that's a fact. However, all was changed. This was no longer a game with moves. It was an artless show of passion. His intentions was revealed. He was seducing her. This put everything he had done in new light. All that before he had been charming now seemed ugly and conniving. The Countess felt embarrassed and used, a door closed that would never open again. That's good. That's good. That is good. In 1950, the young Otto von Bismarck, then 35-year-old deputy in the Prussian parliament, was a turning point in his career. The issues of the day were the unification of many states, including Persia, into which Germany was then divided, and a war against Austria, the powerful neighbor to the south that hoped to keep the Germans weak and at odds, even threatening to intervene if they tried to unite. Prince William, next in line to be Persia's king, was in favor of going to war, and the parliament rallied to the cause, prepared to back any mobilization of troops. The only ones to oppose war were the present king, Frederick William IV, and his ministers, who preferred to appease the power Austrians. Throughout his career, Bismarck had been loyal, even passionate supporter of Persian might and power. He dreamed of German unification, of going to war against Austria, and humiliating the country that for so long had kept Germany divided. A former soldier, he saw warfare as a glorious business. This, after all, was the man who years later would say the great questions of time will be decided not by speeches and resolutions, but by iron and blood. Passionate patriot and lover of military glory, Bismarck nevertheless gave a speech in Parliament at the height of the war fever that astonished all who heard it. Woe unto the statesman who makes war without a reason that will still be valid when the war is over. After the war, you will look differently at these questions. Will you then have the courage to turn into a peasant contemplating the ashes of his farm, to man who has been crippled, to the father who lost his children? Not only did Bismarck go on to talk of the madness of this war, but strangers of all, he praised Austria and defended her actions. This went against everything he had stood for. The consequences were immediate. Bismarck was against the war. Who could this possibly mean? Other deputies were confused, and several of them changed their votes. Eventually, the king and his ministers won out, and the war was averted. A few weeks after Bismarck's infamous speech, the king, grateful he had spoken for peace, made him a cabinet minister. A few years later, he became the Persian premier. In his role, he eventually led his country and a peace-loving king into war against Austria, crushing the former empire and establishing a mighty German state with Persia at its head. Interpretation. At the time of his speech in 1850, Bismarck made several calculations. First, he sensed the Persian military, which had not kept pace with other European armies, was unready for war, that Austria, in fact, might very well win, a disastrous result for the future. Second, if war were lost and Bismarck had supported it, his career would have been gravely jeopardized. The king and his conservative ministers wanted peace. Bismarck wanted power. The answer was to throw the people off the scent by supporting a cause he detested, saying things he would laugh at if he said by another. A whole country was fooled. It was because of Bismarck's speech that the king made him a minister. That was slick. A position from which he quickly rose to be prime minister, attaining the power to strengthen the Persian militarily and accomplish what he had wanted all along, the humiliation of Austria and the unification of Germany under Persia's leadership. Bismarck was certainly one of the cleverest statesmen who ever lived, a master of strategy and deception. No one suspected what he was up to in this case. Had he announced his real intentions, arguing that it was better to wait now and fight later, he would not have won the argument, since most Persians wanted war at that moment and mistakenly believed that their army was superior to the Austrians. Had he played up to the king, asking to be made minister in exchange for supporting peace, he would have not succeeded. The king would have distrusted his ambition and doubted his sincerity. Keys to power. Most people are open books. They say what they feel, blunt out their opinions at every opportunity, and constantly reveal their plans and intentions. They do this for several reasons. First, it is easy and natural to always want to talk about one's feelings and plans for the future. It takes effort to control your tongue and monitor what you reveal. That is so good. Second, many believe that by being honest and open, they are winning people's hearts and showing their good nature. They are deluded. Honesty is actually a blunt instrument which bodies more than it cuts. Wow. Your honesty is likely to offend people. Wow. Wow. It is much more prudent to tailor your words, telling people what they want to hear rather than the coarse and ugly truth of what you feel or think. More important, by being unabashedly open, you make yourself so predictable and familiar that it's almost impossible to respect or fear you. And power will not occur to a person who cannot inspire such emotions. That's good. That's good. If you yearn for power, quickly lay honesty aside and train yourself in the art of concealing your intentions. Master the art that you will always have the upper hand. Basic to an ability to conceal one's intentions is a simple truth about human nature. Our first instinct is to always trust appearances. We cannot go around doubting the reality of what we see and hear. Constantly imagine that appearances conceal something else would exhaust and terrify us. This fact makes it relatively easy to conceal one's intentions. Simply dangle an object you seem to desire, a goal you seem to aim for, in front of people's eyes, and they will take the appearance for reality. Once their eyes focus on the decoy, they will fail to notice what you are really up to. In seduction, set up conflicting signals such as desire and indifference, and you not only throw them off the scent, you inflame their desire to possess you. Wow. Hold on. Let me just put this down for a minute. And they're going to make me think about this because I got to think of some examples. Yeah, I got to think of some examples. Oops. A tactic that, let me do that right. A tactic that is often effective is setting up a red herring is to appear to support an idea or cause that is actually contrary to your own sentiments. Bismarck used this great effort in a speech in 1850. Most people will believe you have experienced a change of heart, since it is so unusual to play so lightly with something as emotional as one's opinions and values. The same applies for any decoy object of desire. Seem to want something in which you are actually not at all interested, and your enemies will be thrown off the scent, making all kinds of errors in their calculations. During the War of Spanish Succession in 1711, Duke of Marlborough, head of the English army, wanted to destroy a key French fort because it protected a vital thoroughfare in France. Yet he knew that if he destroyed it, the French would realize what he wanted to advance down that road. Instead, he merely captured the fort, garnished it with some of his troops, making it appear as if he wanted it for some purpose of his own. The French attacked the fort, and the Duke let them recapture recapture it. Once they had it back, though, they destroyed it, figuring that the Duke had wanted it for some important reason. Now that the fort was gone, the road was unprotected, and Marlborough could easily march into France. That was smart. Use this tactic in the following manner. Hide your intentions not by closing up with the risk of appearing secretive and making people suspicious, but by talking endlessly about your desires and goals, just not your real ones. You would kill 3 birds in one stone. You appear friendly, open, and trusting. You conceal your intentions, and you send your rivals on time-consuming wild goose chases. Another powerful tool in throwing people off the scent is false sincerity. People easily mistake sincerity for honesty. Remember, their first instinct is to trust appearances. And since they value honesty and want to believe in the honesty of those around them, they will rarely doubt you or see your act. Seemingly to believe what you say gives your words great weight. This is how Ego deceived and destroyed Othello. And remember, Othello was Black, African. Given the depth of his emotions, the apparent sincerity of his concerns, the Desdemona's supposed infidelity, how could Othello distrust him? This is also how great con artist Yellow Kid well pulled the wool over suckers' eyes. Seeming to believe so deeply in the decoy object he was dangling in front of them, a phony stock, a touted racehorse. He made its reality hard to doubt. It is important, of course, not to go too far in this area. Sincerity is a tricky tool. Appear over-passionate and you raise suspicions. Be measured and believable, or your rules will seem to put on that it is. To make your false sincerity an effective weapon in concealing your intentions, expose a belief in honesty and forthrightness as important to social values. Do this publicly as possible. Emphasize your position on the subject by occasionally divulging some heartfelt thought, though only one that is actually meaningless or irrelevant, of course. Napoleon's minister Talleyrand was a master at taking people into his confidence by revealing some apparent secret. This fringe confidence, a decoy, would then elicit a real confidence on the other person's part. That is true. Once you reveal something, normally people do reveal something as well. Remember, the best deceivers do everything they can to cloak their roguish qualities. They cultivate an air of honesty in one ear to disguise their dishonesty in others. Ooh. Honesty is merely another decoy in their arsenal of weapons. Wow, we're going to end that there. Wow, that's enough. I got to think about this. Like, share, subscribe, leave a comment.